intros. My name's Debbie from Till Parenting. I was a homeschooling parent for 6 years, homeschooling my differently wired child. And I just love this topic so much. It really changed our whole trajectory. It changed our journey as a family. This is a personal topic for me. As I said, I was a reluctant homeschooling parent. And so my kid, I think, was a reluctant homeschooling kid. That's why I wanted to share this photo. This is kind of like a how it started photo. My kiddo had just turned 9. This was, I think, at the end of our very first week of homeschooling. And you can probably tell from this picture that it was not going very well. I am happy to report, though, that things did get much better. This is actually taken from our last year of homeschooling when we dissected a shark, which was kind of a cool little activity we did. And I will say it didn't happen overnight that we kind of moved and got into a better place, but I came to a place where I felt like those 6 years were kind of the best thing I could have done for my family, for my child, for me. And it just felt like such an honor to get to be able to do that with my kid. So for today, I'm going to talk just a wee bit. I'm going to breeze through the journey. I'm going to talk about how we designed our homeschool, what I think is the most important thing about what we're doing, which is that fostering self-knowledge. And then I'm going to share some of my hard-won wisdom, kind of my best tips for what I learned. So again, I was a reluctant homeschooler. This was about the age when we started doing that. My kiddo, like I was reading in the chat, a lot of your kids are neurodivergent, may have had challenges. If you've had them in traditional school settings, my kid was very sensitive to sounds, very, very kind of heightened nervous system, could really hyper-focus on things, and also just had really strong ideas about the way things should go. And so a lot of those qualities made traditional school really tricky. But we tried for a number of years. I shared these because these are some notes from some very patient and thoughtful teachers who really tried to make this work for our family. But all of those kind of sensitivities and challenges, right, that were related to being a twice exceptional kid with ADHD and a lot going on made, again, those environments really tricky for him. But I tried a couple of preschools, I tried a couple elementary schools. And I think it was towards the end of first grade that a friend of mine invited me over for a cup of tea. And this is an educator who'd known my kid for a long time. And she suggested, Asher's a kid who deserves to be homeschooled, who would really benefit from being homeschooled. It took me probably about a year from the time we had that initial tea until I finally said, okay, you're right. This is what we should be doing. So our family, if you know my story, you know that we had this opportunity in 2013 to move to the Netherlands. And so we moved to Amsterdam and we decided, we're changing everything. Let's change our schooling as well. I will say, when we made that decision, I felt so overwhelmed. I felt completely ill-equipped. I knew that I was really well organized. I love to research. I'm super resourceful. But that first year, if any of you all are in that first year of homeschooling, I don't know if your experience was different from mine, but it was really, really hard. It was hard for all of us. I mean, there was just so much transition going on. And there was a lot of just frustration, I think, within our whole family about all the changes and trying to adjust to homeschooling. So again, back to this picture. So that's when this picture was taken. My kid was clearly missing the routine of a school. I felt really not respected as a teacher. I felt that anything that wasn't Minecraft was not going to happen, or I was getting a lot of pushback. And of course, I was trying to get us to focus on school, my plan for school, and that did not go over well. And then I'll just say personally, I don't know if you guys have ever felt this in your homeschooling journey, but I felt like I was sacrificing my work and my personal time and kind of really going all in to design this cool program that my 9-year-old wasn't appreciating. I don't know why I thought a 9-year-old should appreciate the things that their parents are doing, but that was really hard for me because my life had changed so dramatically. So there were really 4 things that helped me kind of transition to shifting my thinking about how I was experiencing this, which is really so important because that changes everything with how we can show up for our kids. So I want to share these 4 things with you because I recognize that some of you might be really early on in your homeschooling journey. You might be struggling with the adjustment. Maybe it's not going the way that you thought it should. And so I share these with the hope that maybe there'll be some kind of a roadmap, just things to think about to help you get to a place where it feels better. So the first thing was time, right? As in letting time pass. I think that especially if our kids have been in a more traditional school setting, a lot of us can underestimate how big this transition can be, how hard transitions can be. I mean, for all kids, but especially for differently wired kids, transitions can take a long time. I think I realized that my child, because Ash had been in so many different school experiences that were not positive for the most part, that Asher needed time to detox from, some pretty negative school experiences. And so I really just needed to give us time to adjust, to detox. Some people call this deschooling, and also to just kind of define our new relationship. So we were no longer just mother and child, we were now teacher and student, right? And so once I started realizing, okay, this is going to take time, I need to change my expectations and slow down, it helped me feel less impatient with the fact that we didn't just hit the ground running the way I expected to. Again, I think this is really important for those of you who are moving into homeschooling after less than positive experiences in other school settings. It is really likely that your kids' nervous systems are heightened or really hypervigilant, and they may have spent and might still be spending a lot of time in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode, right? So they're kind of really triggered in their nervous systems. And so it's really important that we kind of just give them time to come down and to support that process, because really there's no meaningful learning that's going to happen when your child is in that kind of heightened state. So time was really important. The next thing I did, which was a biggie for me, was letting go of my need to control. I could do a whole talk on the way I like to control everything. I bet I'm not alone in being kind of a control person. I won't use the word freak, but you know what I'm saying. I needed to stop trying to control everything. The way our day looked, how productive we were, what our school looked like, what we were going to accomplish. Because the more that I tried to impose my will and really control this learning environment, the more my child resisted, the more things at our school disintegrated. Again, this was a really hard one for me, and it took me a while. I actually went through a phase where I was kind of like fake letting go. Have you all ever done that? Kind of fake parented. I was definitely saying the right things. I was acting the right way as if someone who was really kind of at peace with the way things were going. But internally, I was still really trying to control things. So I had to kind of switch that up. And I think it was the summer after that first year of homeschooling is when kind of the crap hit the fan, if you will. And I thought I was letting go by like, we're going to not do regular school. We're going to do a really cool summer. And I planned all these camps. It's like sewing camp and architecture camp and nature camp. And I created this, what I thought was a great like curriculum for us for the summer. And kind of halfway through the first week, I was like, oh, this is not what my kid wants or needs right now. This is not going to go well. And I was initially pretty disappointed because I was pretty excited about the summer plans. But I had to kind of just let go and let go of my clinging to this amazing summer that I had designed, and just kind of trust in the process and what we were doing together. I also started to see, okay, even if this isn't my plan, there's learning, right, in all of the things. That's going to continue no matter what any given day looks like. And so that really helped me to kind of shift my mindset. Again, did not happen overnight. Still probably an issue for me. The third thing I did was I asked for help. And this was really critical for me because, again, as a reluctant homeschool parent, as the parent of a child who was emotionally dysregulated and, really recovering from a tough school experience and having really kind of big emotions and expression of those emotions a lot of the time, I had to realize I am not doing well here. Like, I am not feeling really positive. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling frustrated. And so I realized I need help here. And I reached out to a parent coach, and she really helped me. Just, didn't like fix all the challenges, but she helped me not take things personally. She helped me not make, a bad day mean that I was failing as a parent or as a teacher, and just really helped me kind of do that work on myself. When I started doing that work, it helped me feel less stuck and more hopeful. Like, okay, we're going to figure this out. And so it, again, shifted my energy, which then impacted our whole school. And then the fourth thing that really helped me kind of pivot is that I really just leaned in. And when I say lean in, I'm really talking about surrendering to what was going on, right? I surrendered to the fact that, okay, this is what I'm doing. I am a homeschooling parent right now. This is my job. My child learns and thinks differently, and homeschooling my kid is going to require a lot of creativity and energy and presence on my part. And that's what I'm doing. That's my job right now. So when I started kind of leaning in that way, it changed how I felt about everything else, because I think I used to just feel like, okay, I have this to do. I'll tick off the boxes, and then I'm going to pivot and work on the things I really want to do, like my own work and my personal projects. And so I just realized I need to just show up for what's going on today and be all in, be all here. And when I started to do that, again, it really just changed things for both of us. It doesn't mean I didn't have rough days or, days where I felt frustrated, but setting that intention to lean in every day and remind myself that my job was really to be present for this process, it changed everything, how I felt, how my child felt, then how our school dynamic worked. And it just felt more fun in general. So it was really the combination of those four things: the time, letting time pass, letting go, getting help, and leaning in, that started to change things for us, and things started getting really good. I'm actually going to stop sharing because I can't see the chat, and I want to see if there are any questions before I continue. I'm going to scroll up here. Yeah, the learning curve for parents and kids is huge that first year coming out of mainstream schooling. It really is, because I think a lot of us too think, okay, I'm just going to school at home, right? And so it can be hard to even know where to start. And then, the pressure we put on ourselves to get it right, because now we're responsible for this kid's education. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. I'm going to just scroll up and see if there's anything. I'm glad Minecraft got a shout out early on. Yeah, I mean, Minecraft it's a great tool for so many ways. My kid and my husband made mods for years during those homeschool years. They designed and created these mods. And there's so much learning that happened in that. Plus it was fun. Yeah, control's a big one. I think that's the thing, right, for so many of us. And it's still an issue for me. But at least I know that about myself, right? So I can catch myself. I'm like, oh, this is the control. This is the controlling inner child in me who wants to like make everything be a certain way. So any questions, or I'll go back to my screen. I just want to make sure that I check in because again, I can't see the chat, and I'll have time for questions at the end, but I'm happy to take any now. So if I'm talking too fast, let me know because because of starting late, I'm trying to catch up. So I'm trying to not move too quickly. Yeah, so I homeschooled from 3rd through 8th grade. Sorry, I'm just gonna repeat the question if people are just listening. So I was a homeschool parent, and what is my kids' current school life look like now? I was a homeschool parent from 3rd through 8th grade, and then we moved into high school. We moved back to the US, and we're in Brooklyn now, and we actually go to a school that's a one-to-one learning model. So it's kind of like, it is homeschooling in some ways, but with people who are much more qualified on some of the things that my kid really likes to nerd out on. The math alone, like I was like, okay, I'm no longer qualified to be your math teacher. So it was a really nice transition, actually. So to be able to provide that kind of education, I feel really, really grateful for that. But it was a big adjustment for both of us because we hung out together for a long time. Oh, you've been doing math on Outschool, yeah, and have for 4 years. That's awesome. Yeah, I think we did a few Outschool classes towards the end of our homeschooling time together, but not in the math front. But I know the classes on Outschool are, like, I want to be taking all of those classes. Okay, I'm going to go back to share my screen, and we will continue on. I'm going to share with you a little bit about what our homeschool looks like. Hold on a sec. Okay, back to my presentation. Okay, so I wanted to just talk a little bit about how we designed our school. We had a bunch of different schedules over the years. We created them together. The flow ultimately of, what happened when and on which days was always Asher's decision. Well, at least after that first year. The first year I was like, this is my school. I'm going to tell you how it's going to be, but that didn't work so well. So I adapted. And so I was always on board with designing the school the way Asher wanted to, just with the stipulation that we could check in periodically and make sure the schedule's still working for both of us. Does this still feel right? And then knowing that we could adapt if we needed to. So there was always some math, some science, some history, some reading. But there were a lot of electives. So those were really just big chunks where Ash would work on personal projects and dive into random subjects. But I will say that, and this was in my initial overview, in my mind, more important than really any of the academic material is the work that we can do to help our kids foster and build on their strengths and also develop their executive function skills. Executive function skills are things that most, if not all, neurodivergent kids struggle with in some capacity. I mean, there are many different executive functions, so they're probably very uneven and may be stronger in some than in others, but I see this as a really, really important piece of our job. But as part of that, the bigger thing that we're trying to do is to center around this idea of self-knowledge. And this is why I think self-knowledge is so important, because when our kids know themselves on a really, really deep level, they know what their strengths are, they understand their relative weaknesses, they understand how they kind of operate and move through the world, they understand what they need to thrive, they can become their own best advocates and they can feel empowered to create whatever it is that they want in their life as they get older. So again, I think this is important for every single human to really get to know yourself well, but especially for differently wired kids. And I know that I felt this extra responsibility for making sure that my child did not feel limited by ADHD or other learning differences, but rather felt inspired and motivated to figure out, how do I navigate those parts of life that might create challenges for me, but also how do I lean into all the strengths and gifts that come with the way that I think and learn. So there are a lot of different ways to prioritize this goal. I'm going to just share a few ideas with you. So brain science. Talk about brain science a lot. Like, really get into it. The brain is a fascinating thing. And again, it's science. A lot of our kids just really like science. So also, many neurodivergent kids are kind of naturally curious about most things. And so if that is your kid, I would like lean in, like totally capitalize on that. And I also know, I was looking through the just brain science classes, and there's a ton on Outschool. So I love that that's available. So, but I would really go in, because again, it's not about then behavior or about challenges. It's about, your brain is so cool, and this is what your brain is doing, and let's learn about it. Another thing that we did is to explore this idea of mindset, which some of you may be might be familiar with the work of Carol Dweck. And she's a researcher who talked about this idea of a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And so we had watched her TED Talk a long time ago. It's a great talk if you haven't seen it. We kind of skimmed through her book Mindset, and we learned about these concepts of growth mindset and fixed mindset. And that can be such a great framework to share with kids, especially if they're struggling around certain aspects of school, or if they feel anxious when they're starting something new. This is the visual that we used to have tagged on our wall. I love this one because, it kind of puts things in language that kids can relate to. Like, I can learn anything I want to, or there are some kids, a lot of bright and quirky kids, I'm either good at it or I'm not good at it, because a lot of kids are so kind of naturally good at things that when things get more challenging, they're like, well, I'm not going to do that. It's too hard. So this is a really interesting thing to go through with your child. A lot of our kids self-assess very honestly. So you could kind of talk about these, like, where do you see yourself? How do you show up? And see if your child kind of recognizes that they are more growth or fixed mindset. And you can talk about, how can we kind of pivot that? Another thing that we used, which can be really helpful, is this idea of a rubric for self-evaluation. So this is the one that we used over the first couple of years. An educator friend, actually the same friend who had me over for tea and told me to homeschool, helped me create this. So I loved this because we really looked at the areas that were specific to my kid, specific strengths and challenges, and what do we want to work on in those things? And then coming up with this way to assess, how did I do with this project? We didn't do this every day, but if there was a bigger project we were working on, I would print it out and I would ask Asher to go through and kind of rate themselves, assess how well they did on these areas. And again, a lot of our kids do very accurately assess themselves, and this can be just a good way to build that self-knowledge to really help them understand where they can get hung up with things. Another thing we can do to help our kids with self-knowledge is to just always be on the lookout for connections, and how to make those connections in real time. I think as homeschooling parents, that is one of the best things about being with our kids in the way that we are, is we can get to know them so well, and we can look for opportunities to make connections about how they can learn something more about themselves in real time through something else that has happened, right? I'm going to share with you two of my favorite questions that I like to ask, or I used a lot as a way of helping to make connections. So, how did you do that? Or what do you think is going on for you right now? So when things went really well, or my kid would push through something or was blocked, but then sat down and wrote it anyway, I would say, gosh, how did you do that? Because that's normally really hard. what made the difference for you? And then wait, right? Pause. The power of the pause is really a big deal. So if you can ask these questions with a lot of curiosity and openness and just leave lots of room for our kids to be like, well, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I was listening to that song on my headset. Maybe that had something to do with it. Or I was wearing my cozy, fleece pants. And so I'm feeling really comfortable. So I'm feeling calmer and it helped me focus, right? So when we can ask these questions, look for opportunities to ask these questions so that our kids can start to be like, oh yeah, that is interesting, and start making those connections. This is something we can help our kids kind of build a habit for themselves of self-reflecting, and that can help them, again, just get to know themselves really well and understand who they are and how they move through the world and kind of what they need to create what they want in their life. So, okay, I'm going to stop sharing again before I go into my 10 best practices. I'm going to scroll back to see, okay. It always comes back to cozy pants. There's a lot of fleece in my house, I'm just going to say. We are all about the cozy here and knowing how to make a good tea service and how to do all those things. We like the creature comforts. Because a lot of our kids too, their nervous systems can be really heightened. And I think it's so important that we do what we can to help create a really safe, cozy environment at home, spaces at home, so that our kids can have that calm nervous system, so they are more available for learning, for whether that's cognitive learning or those executive function skills, or just kind of emotional regulation development, social emotional growth. Any questions before I share my best practices for homeschooling differently wired kids? And then there'll be time at the end for questions as well. And if you don't mind, you see how the sun, I'm about to be blinded. I'm going to close the blind behind here, and then I'm going to share my screen and we will continue. I love having the sun on my face, but it makes these things challenging. Okay. And Marie asked, I'd love to know what your learning space looks like, where it is, and is it a dedicated space? That's a really good question. So I would say, some people, and my friend Seth Perler, many of you probably know him, he's an executive function coach. He talks about having something called the SSS, the sacred study space, and how important it is for kids to have kind of a place that they associate with school or with learning or homeschool. And I think that works for a lot of families. That's not what we did. We move around a lot. So there is, for example, we have this cozy orange velour chair. And so sometimes, I would suggest, if you're working on this, you want to go sit in the orange chair. It's in our bedroom. Because there's something about sometimes you can associate, I like this idea. And as a writer, I do this too. I associate different rooms and pieces of furniture with different writing projects. So we would do a lot of cafe co-working dates, hot chocolate for Ash, a mochaccino or something for me. We'd both bring our computers and we'd work together. So if we were working on a project on our computers, we might go to a cafe just to change things up. We, of course, would have a desk or working at the table. We would, when I was homeschooling in the Netherlands, we did have a quote unquote classroom. It was our guest room. It was pretty small, but it was a place where I could at least, I had that growth mindset chart. I had our daily schedule set up there, and it was nice because we'd at least start the day there. Okay, time to start the day, but then we would move around quite a bit. So yeah, but that was our room to kind of play in. My 7-year-old daughter wanted me to ask you to be my BFF homeschooling parent. That's funny. Sure. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I will share my best practices, the things I really kind of came to be good at and know about what made our homeschool work. And then again, I'll take questions at the end. Okay. So I talked about this a little bit already, but the first tip is to design an alliance and our school with our kids. And I don't know if you can now hear bass. My child is playing their bass next door. So I hope that that's not interfering too much. Okay. So back to designing an alliance with your child. It's really important that our kids feel bought into what we're doing in the learning and schooling process, and just feel like they're partnering with us. So, again, once I got through those first couple months of Power Mom homeschool teaching, I really shifted to this approach of seeing my child as a co-designer of our school. And that is how I would kick off every year, by talking about the fact that, this is our school. We get to make school in the way that we want to. So it's our school, our rules. And so we would explore, how can we design a school so that both of our needs are met? So it feels good for you, it feels good for me, we can collaborate well together. And then I would always ask Asher, how would you like to structure the days? And I'm gonna just text my husband to ask my kid to lower the bass, if you don't mind, because I'm worried this is gonna be on the recording. Okay. I added a couple of exclamation points, so we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to share with you how our school kind of kept evolving and changing. So this is what our schedule looked like kind of over the years. We kind of upped our game. You can see we up-leveled every year, got a little bit more exciting. I will say that fourth picture there was probably the most fun, because I had like the Velcro, and we like created a color-coded, I really like color coding. We created like color-coded little tabs, and it could move around and change from day to day. But again, having our kids co-design the schedule and the curriculum, it helps them feel motivated and bought into school, and just have that sense of control and agency instead of being like forced into a construct. And the bonus of this is that designing this alliance with our kids, designing our school, there's so much executive function learning that goes into this, right? We're planning, we're organizing, we're making schedules, we are creating time estimates, we're tracking time, we are coming up with strategies for transitions, strategies for days that we feel less than motivated. So much learning can go into this, the kind of learning I think is so important. Okay, tip 2, be willing to ditch the plan. So again, we talked about letting go of control. I think this learning how to just call it, be like, okay, I thought we were going to be doing this today, but clearly this is not happening today. Being willing to do that and to say, you know what, it is not happening. We are going to shift gears for today, and we'll try again tomorrow. It's such an important thing to be able to do. I mean, many of us are homeschooling kids because of their wiring, because of their sensory challenges. And so being able to adapt, like that's why so many of us are homeschooling. And it's the benefit, I think, is being able to really meet them where they are at any given time. So in my world, I would say something like, I see you're having a really tough day. We're homeschooling. The good news is when we have tough days, we can take a pause and take care of ourselves. So I would just say, why don't you grab a book? You want to get in my bed? I'll make you some hot chocolate. And we would just do that. And that helped my kid feel really seen and heard. And it also usually meant the next day would be better, right? Because I wasn't escalating things. Also, I would just say, Ditching the plan is also teaching self-knowledge. It's teaching coping strategies. It's teaching understanding one's body. It's teaching self-care. These are all really important life skills. Okay. Oh yeah, I was just going to share this. I did a pajama day. So you can also like just shake things up. This was a very popular day when I said tomorrow's a pajama day. Actually, I think I surprised Asher that morning. I'm like, guess what? And I said, you come up with the order of how you want to do things. And that's the order they came up with. And I love that they added a few things of their own, including 0, hug. Number 8 was you are the best mom ever. And 9 is hug. And I will tell you, it was the parent of an 18-year-old. I'm gonna go back and look at this later because I need to be reminded that I'm the best mom ever. Okay. My next tip is to question everything. And so this is something I talk a lot about at Tilt. It's also a lesson I have to keep kind of learning over and over again, not just in relation to homeschooling, but just in relation to parenting a differently wired kiddo. But we are so conditioned to think that there are right ways and wrong ways to learn, to parent, to school, to grow, to kind of be in the world. And that can get us into trouble when we're homeschooling neurodivergent kids, because we might just like be blindly subscribing to these like rules without realizing, wait a minute, does this actually work for my kid and for my family? I'm going to give you just a quick example, which could be a whole other talk, and that's our kids' time on screens. I know that a lot of parents have a lot of feelings about our kids being on screens. Again, it's a whole other talk. I don't have the answers for your screen time challenges, but I'll just say we have a lot of ideas based on, you know, what society thinks or what this person thinks, what our fear is. And there is no one size fits all policy for screens. There just isn't. Screen time, all screen time is not created equally. Our kids can use screens in different ways. Obviously, their lives are going to involve technology. So we want to think about how do we help them have a healthy relationship with tech. So just putting that out there. We just want to be curious. We want to employ a curious mindset and question any of those really kind of firm beliefs or rules that we have about what school should look like. I'm going to use air quotes when I say should. All right, next we want to remember our personal why for homeschooling. This can be really helpful to remember when you have a bad day of homeschooling. And I took this concept from Simon Sinek. He wrote a book called Start With Why, and it was actually a book for business leaders, but it applies to parents. So many of us focus on the what and the how, and we get kind of stuck there. And it can be so helpful to just go back to the very heart. Why are we doing this in the first place? And that can be so helpful when you're homeschooling your child, is to be really clear on that. This is what my personal why was as a homeschooling parent, to help my child feel safe and secure so he can learn and grow with confidence, agency, and self-understanding. So I would just go back to that, and that would kind of help ground me when I had a bad day. I'd be like, okay, I remember why we're doing this, and it's worth it because this is the big goal. Look for the learning in everything. Going back to the idea that homeschooling is about freedom and flexibility, and we can approach this however we want. There's also the fact that we can learn through absolutely everything that happens. I'm going to give you a couple examples of how I really leaned into this. There's a video game called Subnautica. Maybe some of your kids play it. It's pretty cool. But Ash was really obsessed with it for a while and was very distracting at school. So instead of fighting it, I said, why don't you're trying to figure out how to win this game and map a path. Why don't you like design it? So that was great. Spatial relationships, drawing, writing, problem solving, organizing thoughts. So I just leaned in. Another example, we watched that movie Interstellar, and Ash was very interested in black holes and the time-space continuum and relativity. So that was all that was being talked about in our morning meeting. And I said, you know what, why don't you be the teacher today? Because I don't understand this stuff. Can you explain it to me? And so I just kind of leaned in. So again, lots of skills we were able to tap into. And I ended up creating this project planning worksheet, so that if there was like a strong project or an area of interest, I'd be like, okay, so great. How can I help my kid learn more about planning and organizing, setting goals, working toward things? So I had a stack of these in our school, and we would just fill them out. And we worked on so many executive functions. So that, just a couple examples, but really you get where I'm going with this. Everything is an opportunity to learn if we approach it with creativity. Okay, tip 6, I'm just being mindful of the time. I'm gonna go through these last ones quickly in case there are any last questions. Surround yourself with people who support your choice. Not everyone gets homeschooling. I will say in the Netherlands, it's almost illegal. I mean, I did it legally, but there's a lot of stigma around it. So it was really important that I spend time with people who really supported why we were doing this and what we were doing. So again, that's one of the great things about this community, this conference, is you're getting to hang out with people who really get it and support what we're doing for our kids. Practice self-care. I call it conscious maintenance every single day. I have a whole other talk on this, so I'm not going to go into it all now, but I will just say that it's really important that you prioritize yourself and take some time to care for yourself in order to be able to show up for your child, because we can't co-regulate, we can't kind of be with them if we are not taking care of ourselves. Timelines. A whole other talk I give, but it's so important to remember that your child is on their own unique timeline, right? We have these ideas about where kids should be or they're behind, and now post-COVID, there's all this talk about lagging skills and learning loss, and our kids are all on their own unique timeline. And can be hard because we are often confronted with where they should be. This is a picture of us in the Netherlands, and I share it because at this age, a lot of Dutch kids are biking everywhere, right, on their own. And that's just not where we were. Like, crossing streets was complicated, right? So I had to kind of realize, okay, we're working on other stuff right now. We're not on everybody else's timeline. So I'll just say before I move on is that if you are having strong feelings about something that your child is or isn't doing, there's a good chance that it's related to the fact that you think they should be somewhere else on their developmental timeline. So just be aware of that, and instead kind of get curious about where your child is, because these kids are complicated and asynchronous in how they develop. All right, my last 2 tips. Find a good substitute teacher. We all need substitutes. This is the day that my husband's substitute taught. He did it like once a month. You can see Asher played that trick where it's like, oh, if you roll a quarter down your forehead, I don't remember what was going to happen. It was relaxing. So of course, Darren did that and walked around for the rest of the day with ink on his face. So anyway, substitute teacher, if you can find one, even once a month, can make a difference. And then lastly, lean in and surrender to what you're doing together. Perhaps the most important of all, it really ties everything together, but this again is about being present for our kids and knowing that they're really attuned to our energy. So we really just want to kind of be present for what's going on, surrender to what we're doing together, and show up in that space. And I'm going to stop sharing. There we are. See, that's a much better picture than the angry kid sitting on the dock. This was the day we saw the cherry blossoms at my favorite park in the Netherlands. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I think we are, I know we're at 12:55 or 9:55. So thank you. Yeah, Bridget Understood has great resources for executive function. They're just a great resource altogether. Conscious maintenance. Yeah, I use that because self-care is kind of like a bad stigma. Um, Gets a bad rap, like it's really indulgent. I don't think it's indulgent. I think it's really necessary that we prioritize ourselves. We also want to model that for our kids. We want our kids to know that they matter and that they need to take care of themselves so that they can feel good in their body and in their mind. So any questions before I have to wrap up? Any book suggestions for improving executive functions? Yeah, Smart but Scattered is what Bridget shared. That's kind of like the main one. I think that's kind of The Disintegrating Student is another book. I can't remember the author, but that's also about executive functioning. Seth Perler, it's sethperler.com. He has a ton of free resources and a great YouTube channel and explains so much. So I highly recommend. Jolene said, isn't every day a PJ day? Yes, especially now. Especially now. Any questions before I have to close the room? Yeah. Mona Delhook and Dr. Ross Green. Mona is a friend of mine. She is amazing, and I'm so grateful for the work that she's doing in the world and how she is really kind of taking things to a whole new level of helping to understand our kids, felt experience, who are dysregulated, or how she calls them nervous system platforms that aren't very sturdy. Oh yeah, How to ADHD. That's another good one. Well, thank you so much for that comment, Megan. That's lovely. I guess I should probably close the room. Thank you for being here today.